the 8th of November, excuse me. Welcome to members and officers. If we can just go through the agenda items where we are. Authorisation, please, to sign the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 4th of October.
So move.
Welcome, thank you very much. Apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Byrne and
Much. Additional agenda items, Malcolm?
There is an additional item. Sorry, Chairman, I haven't got my agenda in front of me. Tell you in a moment.
I think it's the household support.
Household support grant. Yeah. Apologies.
Very much. That's an additional item and no urgent decisions.
There are no urgent.
The disclosure of interest, members, are there any disclosures to be made at this point? And if so, reminded to repeat them at the commencement of the item in question. No? Jolly good. Okay, we will move on then to the first report. If I could just scroll down, it's agenda item 6. This is your report, Deborah. Thank you. Head of Neighbourhood Services, to set up proposed fees and charges for 2022/2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. This report proposes a set of revised fees and charges for a range of services provided by the Council financial year 2023 for members' approval. Details of the charges are set out in the appendices attached to this. I'd just like to draw your attention to Appendix 4, Canvas Summer Tariff, which should read £7.50 for hours, not the £6.50 noted. So please accept my apologies for that error. I'll be brief, as no doubt members will have reviewed the report and will have noted that in order to cover the rising costs for the delivery of these services, in most cases, the recommended increases are in line with the current rate of inflation of 4.8% as at the end of September 2021. But there are a few notable exceptions to this report as follows. Paragraph 26 refers to beach hut licences, which will rise above inflation, which reflects increased demand and associated increased administration requirements of the sites. In paragraph 29, other foreshore services such as licence charges for pleasure boats, equipment boxes and winches are considerably lower than neighbouring authorities. So it is recommended they rise above inflation, bring them up to a more realistic pricing. Paragraph 32, off-street car parking. Other than the cost of annual parking permit and the 3 Canvas Sands car parks, all other car park charges, including annual permits for the long stay car parks, will remain unchanged. This is to allow the off-street car parks task and finish group to complete its work, make further recommendations in time to come. Appropriate. Paragraph 39, bulky waste collections. The charge for 1 to 3 items, which is by far the most used by residents, will remain the same in order to assist with the more recent downward trend in pricing. And paragraph 48, garden waste subscription service. It's recommended to increase the subscription cost to £50 per container from the next annual renewal period of 15th of July 2022. This remains good value for money when compared to neighbouring authorities, rates to £2.17 per container per collection. So in conclusion, the increases recommended in this report are intended to support the medium-term financial strategy of the Council, ensure that non-statutory services are broadly self-funding, and ensure that revenue levels are protected against the effects of inflation.
Very much, Deborah. May I just ask a question with regards to bulky waste? Because there have been several instances where there have been, quite a sort of people abusing our ring area, ring sites. Are we finding there's been an increase at all of the demand for the bulky waste collection?
Slight increase in the but nothing particularly notable.
Are there any questions of Deborah while we've got this report?
Thank you, and thank you for the report, Deborah. Just a comment really about government in their plans for the Environment Bill. We're proposing that our garden waste collection should be free. Have you had any further information about that?
Thank you, Councillor. No, unfortunately not. The UK Environment Bill at the moment has been slightly delayed. An amendment. Still waiting to hear if that will come true about the garden.
Jonathan, Councillor Vinehall.
I was really pleased on the wastes because I know there was a lot of concern about putting the price up last time, but in fact the number of containers has gone up, not gone down. Because do you remember what it was last year?
Well, we peaked. Obviously, it varies throughout the year. We peaked about 19,000 drivers, and paying last year up to over 20,000. About 20,065 paid up. But there are obviously some people with container up to that.
Campaign.
Yes, it's a possibility.
Actually, upward flexibility on this.
I would suggest it says in the report what Wilden, Hastings, and charging. Possibly a little bit of flexibility. We are still cheap.
My price.
I would suggest you wait for the UK Environment Bill to come out.
Thank you for that question, Jonathan and Deborah. And it does represent good value, I think, when we compare with what's elsewhere. Was there any?
Yeah, thank you. I just ask the people that are having more than one garden waste, are they paying the 45 each, or are we giving them?
Yeah, they're paying for.
And is that what other authorities?
Generally speaking.
Yes. Yes, thank you. In relation to the issue around car parking charges, I think this is absolutely the right thing to do, to wait until such time as the Task and Finish group come to a conclusion about that. But I am really pleased that you've recognised that with Wainwright Road we do need to create a differential between Wainwright Road and the Delaware car park. Because at the moment, I think if people have got the choice of the two at the same price, they'll probably want Delaware car park. And we think from a town centre steering group perspective, we would want to keep that for shoppers and for town. I've got a question actually about fishing, and I wondered if you could perhaps explain a little bit more about the commercial fishing boat sites and where they are, and are they sort of, why do we need to make a charge for them?
Hand over to Lindsay to answer that one.
We don't currently have any commercial boat sites let. The price has always been in the fees and charges report, but over the last few years we haven't had any takers. However, we are still a lot cheaper than neighbouring authorities. So obviously it's for councillors to determine whether we set a price and what that price should be, whether we would wish to lower to encourage perhaps somebody to take it up, but nobody has taken it up at the price.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Just clarify.
Please do.
Yes, it was just to say that all the boats that you see out, you asked which areas they were in as well. All the boats you see out at the foot of Valley Hill, Moffin Castle, are all classed as pleasure boats, so they might be out fishing for their own personal gain.
Does that clarify, Christine, what you already asked?
Yes, I think that does clarify the position. I think maybe into the future, maybe we might want to look at neighbouring authorities or what happens along the coast. Whether we do in fact want to make it more attractive for people to base a commercial fishing boat in Bexhill. I think there used to be one where the Sovereign Light Cafe. There was a guy who used to have a boat where he used to sell fish up when he came in. But I haven't seen that for a long, long time. So yes, thank you. Thank you for the explanation.
Any other members of Cabinet got a question? Councillor Paul Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from what Councillor Bayliss was commenting on about car park permits, could I ask Deborah whether once the Task and Finish group has completed their recommendations, will there still be an opportunity for Cabinet to alter the present recommendations in Appendix 4 in time for the 21-22 financial year charge?
The fees charges following year.
In that case, if there's uncertainty on that, then can I make the case for having differential prices between the Delaware car park and Wainwright Road car park? The daily fee at Wainwright Road was drastically cut, but the annual parking permit has remained the same. It hasn't followed. Now, Delaware Road, I can see it from my office window. I see all the movements in and out of the car park every day. It's almost always full. I can only think of one day in the past 3 months where it hasn't filled up. And there are cars driving in, not finding a space, and driving out. Now, I would suggest that significant signage in the Delaware car park, advertising and other advertising might shift permit holders to Wainwright Road while the Delaware remains full. And because the Delaware is oversubscribed, I think that the effect of differential parking permit prices plus signage would provide extra revenue for the council by adding to revenue at Wainwright Road car park while not impacting on a generally full Delaware car. And I would appreciate Cabinet considering reducing the Wainwright Road annual parking permit from the £23 posed to say £250. And I believe that that change, while lowering the price, would increase the quantity so much that there would be additional revenue to Rother.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cortell. I'll invite Ben Hook to make a comment on that, and possibly Councillor Dixon, and possibly Deborah. Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's really important that, that the points that you raised, Councillor Cortell, are perfectly valid. I think it's really important that we allow the car park task and finish group really explore these recommendations in great detail and then make their own recommendations back up through the various decision-making changes. Because, you know, it's all well and good sort of listening to what you say now and taking on board those points. But I think given the fact that the task and finish group have really looked at these in detail, I have to give them the option to make those recommendations.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ben. And Deborah, you would like to come back on that?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to highlight in Appendix 4 that Wainwright Road will be cheaper at 323 than the other similar nominated permits for one car, which will be 350. So there is a differential there now. We put that in delivery. We're hoping that that will encourage people to take car parks more. And just to reassure Councillor, we are also working as part of the task and finish group on where we can try and direct people more clearly to the long. That is
Yes, thank you for that, Deborah. And I think it's an acknowledgement of the work that has been done by members on that task group. And I think it's so important that we acknowledge the fact that that's the work that they're doing and let them complete that work before we undertake any further changes. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to also comment on Sir Courtell and his proposals. The problem is with our car parking permits is if you compare them against our neighbours in Hastings and divide out the cost per day, they're simply too cheap. And that's the problem. It's not that Wainwright Road is too expensive, it's that the Delaware car park is actually too cheap. Because we're charged, as it says here, for £350 per annum, which is the recommended price. That is still just 96 pence per day, which is very, very reasonable, to say the least. In Hastings, an annual permit will cost you over £700. So you can see that we're quite out of step with that. And I think that is the differential, is where we need to be looking at, is that the Delaware is actually too cheap. Other car parks in permits actually are too cheap for the costs that we have. Of course, we do have to pay rates, like on car parking. So the differential is a good idea, and that's what we're proposing in this paper. A small differential at this point, but I would see that in the future that differential will increase as we increase car parking permits going forward. Of course, there are other options, and Councillor Cook is here tonight, and she's no doubt taken all this on board for her car park working group. But of course, could stop car permit holders altogether in the Delaware Pavilion car park. That's an option that we haven't discussed, or we could reduce the number of permits that are sold in the Delaware Pavilion. Actually, then force more people to go elsewhere. So there are other options than simply cutting prices. And I'm afraid I'm the curmudgeon here again tonight to say that we do not have the wriggle room in our budget to cut prices. I wish we would. I wish we could do a lot of things, but we simply do not have that capability in budgets, and we need to be raising as much money as we possibly can, yet keeping it affordable for our residents. We need to ensure our costs are covered and that we're not out of step with our neighbours, and I think with that we possibly are. With the rest of the report, you have to remember that some of our charges are fixed by government. We can't increase those, and some services cannot make a surplus, so we have to work things out on that basis. I'm very pleased that we have only increased them by 4% over the main. That shows that we are trying to make things as affordable as possible, but I refer back to the previous that we have very, very little wriggle room in the budget. I think in discussions that we've had about this report, we do recognise that there are probably more detail that we need in some of these. It would be very useful to see some of the costs we incur against some of these services, compare exactly how we are doing and whether we're making money or losing money, and whether charges are covering costs. After all that, Chairman, I'd like to recommend the report and propose the report as published.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I've got someone to second that report. Councillor Bayliss, yep, thank you. And if we can vote on the recommendation as per the report, agenda item 6, those in favour? Very much indeed. Thank you, Deborah, Lindsay, and thank you very much, Councillor Cook, and leading the task group, because I think that's been quite a heavy bit of work. But thank you very much indeed for the way that you've tackled it. If we can move on, please, to item 7. which is the Stritter. Oh, no, it's not. It happens to be street. The street litter infrastructure. Golly, that's a new one. And draft litter strategy for Rother. Report of Deborah. Thank you, Deborah. And Cabinet Member Councillor Projak. So this is the start, isn't it? This is the start of what we want to go forward and achieve. So if you could just lead us through that one, Deborah, please.
Yes, this is the purpose of this report is form on a infrastructure award and present the draft litter strategy. So a fundamental part of the strategy is the development of local government level litter strategies. Review of the infrastructure is a term used to describe having the right bin in the right place to underpin the objective of a clean environment. To this end, officers submitted a draft litter strategy to the RAC organisation earlier this year, and we were successful in achieving a grant award. The maximum award was £25,000. So we did very well there. We purchased quite a few litter bins, two of which were smart solar compactor bins. I don't know if anybody's seen those, but they're along the seafront and working very well. But they squash the boxes and things put into them, and therefore they have a larger capacity, working very well. And the grant application required officers to review the existing infrastructure and identify ways in which it could be improved and draft a litter strategy. So this is to fulfil part of the litter strategy, to present this to you for the award. And you can see in Appendix A, the actual strategy, which is very much a high level document outlining our approach, working collaboratively with town and parish councils to ensure we have the right bin in the right place. Work has already started and neutral. We will hope to work with businesses, genders and sponsorship for litter bin like that. But the aim at the end of the day is to support a change in culture towards littering, make it something that's unacceptable. And a lot of this will depend on the environment then as well, that might have on So in conclusion, I ask that Rother District Council approve the litter strategy to support the work of central government reducing littering, create a clean environment for our residents.
Very much. Questions to Deborah, Councillor Bayliss, Christine.
Yes, thank you very much. And I welcome that you council has developed a strategy, and especially welcome the award of the grant in the summer. And the compactor bin that we've got, actually, I'm never quite sure if it's actually a few metres into Sackville Ward or it's actually in Central Ward, but whatever, it is absolutely first rate, and it does the job. I have got some comments about the litter strategy, and I hope when we get sort of the next iterations of the strategy, we can perhaps explore those. I think for me, the big thing that's missing from the causes of litter is around the effect of seagulls, and that actually the new litter bins that we've had on the seafront are not seagull proof. The birds can still perch on the top, still poke their heads through the gap, pull out whatever litter is, or usually cardboard boxes. So you end up on occasions, and I know I've shared probably hundreds of photographs of litter with you, Deborah. It can cause a real mess. Seagull-proof bins are very expensive. You're talking about running into the thousands, as opposed to maybe the hundreds for the ordinary litter bins. But with a strategy which sets out that as an issue. And I recently did some work with Rye Chamber of Commerce in my role as lead on economic development, and they were really clear about the need to provide what are seagull-proof bins. I know I've shared photographs with you, and I know they are expensive, but I think if we got the strategy, we might be really successful in getting those. And some of the, I can't think of the word, and the bins that would look okay in Rye. Heritage, thank you, Councillor Cook. The heritage type bins would look good in Rye and perhaps in Bexhill Town Centre. So that would be my first point. And they are one of the major causes of litter in central Bexhill, Sackville Ward, Hollington Ward, down on Herbrand Ward. The list that you've got in paragraph 58, which talks about the various different themes of the work, is great, but I think you also need a comms. You need to have a sort of like, if you like, a comms line, so it shows where, if you're doing something around enforcement, for example, you've got something around, if there's a comms line and some comms objectives and action points. I think that would be really, really key. And on the point of enforcement, we don't really talk about that. And I know that we have spoken in the last year about the fact that we actually don't take anyone or fine anybody for littering, in whether it's a policy that we don't actually fine it. Perhaps I shouldn't say that on live live broadcast. But I really think we need to look at that again. Maybe it's the cost of employing somebody to do the enforcement makes it, not cost effective. But at the end of the day, we do need to have a sort of that final way of sending a message out to the public that actually, if you're going to litter our streets, we will fine you. So those would be the points that I would ask if we could, when we develop a next version or bid for further money, that we incorporate those things. Thank you.
Seagulls don't just exist in Rother, do they? So presumably other local authorities along where seagulls out there do have these problems. And, do they have special bins, or do they just, is there a cheaper version of these particular seagull-proof bins that we've identified?
What can I say? At the moment, I haven't come across a bin that is seagull-proof, but I'm very willing to explore that because things are changing all the time. So I'm sure that we haven't explored. So we will keep an open mind. Because basically, this strategy is all about keeping an open mind. What we have explored is putting backs on the bins that we've got. We can actually fit backs to the apertures, and currently a cheaper option. In my experience, flaps fall off, get stuck, people have things through the slots and leave open, and the bag pulling out, and then the scalp attack. That's the only reason I say I haven't come across anything flaps or doors or any sort of opening. They can be attacked. But yes, the solar compactor bins are seagull proof, but they are £5,000 each. Yeah.
Mentioning that in your strategy, you don't get the extra money to pay for it, and I think it's really important that there's a good argument for having seagull-proof bins.
This is the start point, and we understood that this was the start point. Councillor Vinehall, Jonathan.
Yeah, there's just a couple of points I wanted to make. Litter in villages is usually quite well dealt with by villages. They're quite good at having litter picking and all sorts of things. But the real problem in the rural area, I'm not sure how race that is probably the more significant problem. So it's very different. It comes along and just dumps a whole lot of stuff on the road, and it's very hard to catch them. But somewhere to try and address that, that's a communication issue as well. So that's the one thing that upsets residents. That could happen to stop it happening. People do it, but how we go forward, how we somehow communicate, perhaps it's a question of cameras in. There are certain places that that like it. Discussion about one the other day.
Thank you. I invite Councillor Vicky Cook. But the other day I listened to Jeremy Vine. Apparently, all the whole litter thing is all about women's institutes and keep Britain tidy. That's where it all started.
I'm Mothers Union. I'm not.
Oh, I beg your pardon. No, that was one of the same. So forgive me. Question's yours, please.
Thank you very much. Under the partnership working, you've identified community groups, working with community groups, promoting partnership, recognising and rewarding the contribution of volunteers, and considering quality of place. I wonder if there isn't an opportunity to make shops and outlets responsible themselves by either providing their own bins or putting clearer messages on their disposable cups and polystyrene dishes, telling them where they can, sensibly and responsibly dispose of them. In Battle, we've invested in some dual heritage bins, and they are fairly successful. And BIFA have been very good, or whoever collects the waste from the litter bin, very good about keeping it separate, which we're very grateful for. Over the weekend, of course, we had our big bonfire celebrations, and the town was a disgrace on Saturday night. By Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, the town was clear. BIFA and the Battle Bonfire Boys have cleared it. So it is possible to work with community groups. I was out there cleaning up the churchyard, disposing of the bottles and the cans and the wrappers and goodness knows what else. And a lovely BIFA man pulled up next to me and said, "Is your bin full yet, love? Just leave it there and I'll take it for you," which I thought was amazing. So, I think some positive as well about that. But I do wonder if we shouldn't be approaching the
It's a very good point, and I think that's come forward previously in discussions with ward councillors in Central Ward. Any other questions, Councillor Cortell and then Councillor Sandcombe?
First, I'd like to commend Deborah and the officers on obtaining the £22,500 grant and on installing the very successful compactor bin along the Bexhill seafront. I think there is a relatively better, inexpensive, more seagull-proof bin. We had a completely open bin in the car park on Eversley Road, and seagulls were having field day. And recently, I've noticed that the new bin that has been installed in Eversley Road car park is now almost seagull-proof. It's just, I haven't noticed seagulls being able to get in there and getting any garbage out. So if that particular bin could be replicated elsewhere, I think that might be a partial solution to the problem. There are a couple of concerns I've got, though. There's, first of all, the flats above shops in central Bexhill appear to be discriminated against by having to put out their litter by 7 a.m. And I would ask councillors in this chamber, would you like to have to put your litter out before 7 a.m? Because speaking personally, I would not. And
I think this is a litter strategy, not a household collection debate. So I don't really want to go there, Paul, if I can help it this evening. But I think the points that you made regarding Eversley Road, there's a receptacle there. We could look at that and move on. So if we could just move on and invite Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is great to see a litter strategy, very much needed. I don't think there's a councillor in this council who hasn't had an email or two from residents referring to litter problems. Just by way of example about the community partnership and working with community groups. It's in the report, as Councillor Cook also mentioned. Just yesterday, in fact, a couple of groups in Sidley, Bexon Environmental Group, and a group of community supporters and a few others did a litter pick along Sidley High Street and around the area. They found 55 pieces of PPE, including wipes and masks and such, 314 pieces of confectionery wrapper, 272 drinks containers, 48 takeaway packets, over 200 cigarette butts, 37 pieces of drug paraphernalia, 7 bagged dog messes. So not just dog mess, but bagged, but still littered. And in other unusual things such as fireworks, perhaps expected at this current time of year, boxes of nails, repair kits for people's glasses, air fresheners, carpets, shower heads, traffic cones, dismembered and put all over the place. So, you know, there's a lot of litter around, and it comes from all sorts of people. Seagulls are an issue, but certainly in my ward and others, people are more of an issue than seagulls, really, when it comes to litter. And anything we can do to tackle people, and that is working with community groups, that is fostering a sense of responsibility amongst communities to look after their area, I think is very, very welcome. And obviously, money is very welcome too. Thanks for the strategy.
Thank you for those comments. I think those comments are shared by most ward councillors, and as we get to a situation where there's less being collected, the message is getting through and people are being a bit more responsible. Councillor Ryan Drayson.
Thank you, Chair. Just forewarning, let's remember this conversation at the next Cabinet meeting when proposed not to support a PSPO, stop people putting bags next to bins. I will be arguing in favour of doing that.
Thank you for that. I think we've got to a situation with any further questions. I'll invite Councillor Project Sue to.
Thank you. And can I thank Deborah and the team for all the work they've done this past year. It's been, I mean, litter has been a huge, huge issue for us in your work, particularly. And congratulations again on getting that grant. Because, I mean, when you look at litter statistics, I mean, sure, everybody around this table, you look at litter and see fly tipping and you think, where is the respect for this country? It really is. But actually, the statistics show that it hasn't actually got worse, except for fly tipping. And actually, the fly tipping is getting a little bit better. Now the county have got their sites open more regularly and they're not restricting people going in. So fly tipping is issue. Thank you, Councillor Coleman, for your list, because your list chimes with everything CPRE list about what is the content. And it's people that are the problem, as you've said. It's actually people behaviour. So education is a big thing on our list. I do want to acknowledge the work that volunteers do. I mean, it's extraordinary. Strandliners, what they do. The volunteers from Rotherham Environment Group and Bexhill Environment Group and the villages do as well. I mean, every year we have a litter pick, and I'm always amazed at how much we get. And again, BIFA support us with that by taking it away. So the volunteers are incredible. I mean, in our own village, just recently, we had 70 plus volunteers. And we also ran a competition in the primary school to do a poster. And that is some way of getting into, we need to get into the culture of people just throwing it down, thinking somebody else will pick it up. And it's just so detrimental in every aspect of our lives. We think about wildlife, think about, it may it's unattractive for a start, but contamination. Where do we get Japanese knotweed from? People dumping it. And also, it's been proved time and time again that when you see litter, it has a negative effect on your well-being, which is very interesting. But also, and Councillor Dixon will know this, that's the cost. The cost financially is huge. And what Councillor Bayliss is proposing is a cost. Have we got resources to have enforcement? We know enforcement is difficult. We know with dog fouling, it's absolutely impossible. And with litter, you've got to actually catch them at the point of them doing it. And what kind of resources do you need for that? The bins we've talked about, the best one is the solar powered bin, and £5,000 each. Where's the money for that coming from? So these are all wonderful ideas, but somehow or other, unless you're going to apply for more grant funding, and I don't know if there's pots out there, that's the way we've got to think of it in the context of the budget. The other thing is,
is, do you remember when the government put, is it 5p and 10p now on plastic bags? By doing that in one stroke, they did what would have taken us 20 years to do with education and spending and enforcement. And so my view is that it's got to be this government initiative coming up in the Environment Bill. So the two big pieces of legislation, which I hope are going to be passed, which is one is the end producer, which actually makes companies reduce their packaging and take back the packaging that they produce. So the end producer is actually responsible. Because that's one of the problems with our litter bins, is that people don't smash them up and put them in the bin. As soon as you've got any kind of aperture in a bin, the seagulls learn how to do it. It'd be interesting to see what Eversley Road one is like. But the other one is the deposit return scheme. So you will get money back on your glass bottles, on your plastic bottles. Now that is going to make a huge difference. And I just hope it comes in. And it'll make a huge difference, not only to littering, but also we're going to have to think of the wider picture of recycling. What does that do to our recycling targets? So there are a lot of issues around litter. I picked up one bit of statistics. It cost, and fly tipping, cost this country 50 million to get with fly tipping. 50 million. So, you know, things have to be done about it. But as I say, my view is that the legislation is the way to go, the national legislation. Thank you again, Deborah, and your team.
Thank you very much. So we'd like to move the report and someone to second the report. Can be if you like.
I'll second that.
Right. Thank you very much indeed for all the work, and those in favour. Very much indeed. Right, we move forward. Food, item 8, food and drink concessions. This is a report of Graham Burgess, who's here this evening, and Deborah Keneally, who's presenting the report. Deborah, Graham is right. Nice to see you, Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. This report's really come about as a result of a number of inquiries that have come in both to myself and my team, Deborah's team, over the past number of months, operating sessions, and I have a suspicion that it is partly driven by the fact that the traditional outlets for these festivals are place. And difficulty that has posed us is whilst and say, right, can I put a food stall on such and such a place, wherever it might be? Inevitably, we have to say, well, no, because actually there's quite a lot to be done. It's behind that. So felt that actually it was better to take a managed approach to this. Actually identify where might be suitable to operate on permanent footing, properly managed license arrangement, whereby we can actually offer a number of approved locations to the marketplace and actually manage that process in a way. One of the issues, for example, planning commission, putting in long hours, so electric and so on. So there's a bit of work sitting behind the scenes take place, but we've identified in the appendix a number of locations where footfall is sufficient to attract interest from operators and where they aren't direct competition existing. So those are set out in the report. it's difficult to predict exactly what income we will get out of that. I think we will see what the market brings. For those, I've given one or two examples in where we have ice cream and so on are generating income. Very much varies to location, but we do expect that at the very least break even next year on the upfront costs, and then obviously after that.
Thank you, Brad. Did you want to add anything to that, Deborah, at all? Points that you really hadn't been covered on.
Well, just to say, say that we are also looking at the options in the climate rising from healthy eating.
Thank you for that. Questions, Councillor Hazel Timothy, and then
Could I just ask locations that you, for example, splash deck below pages that you say no seating area? What's large areas?
Yes, I mean the area question. In fact, we don't own all that area, so the area where I mean certainly it's something that our first, given that there would be a vehicle parked down there going along the section. Like with
Does that go for all the other decisions there? We've said no seating, like at Rye, Salts, pet level. Is that the same thing?
Yes, I think it was really just to manage the areas in households again.
Sorry, it's just that it's very popular, isn't it? This type of casuals. And just a bit, oh, whether it's the right decision.
Deborah, would you like to add any comments to that?
Yes, if I may, thank you. The report is based on a combination of static and mobile units, and we were thinking in terms of covenant certain areas and plan permission. It might only be possible mobile units, I believe, Pages Gap, and that might not then engender people. If you've seen the mobile unit, it's usually somebody that opens up a side and offers to do things in that aspect. We can certainly bear that in mind and flexible on what the offering is, but I think that was what that was based on.
Thank you. Could I just ask also, how many requests have we had that sort of prompted this action?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't I couldn't tell you. I would think certainly I would think about a dozen.
And about the same coming through services. And they're probably, some of them may be crossover, but they may be different.
Okay, thank you.
Again, if I can come in there just to manage expectations, I think a lot of those inquiries were generated because of COVID and the vacation aspect, and that they thought there'd be greater footfall and that sort of thing. So it might be that now things have settled down a little bit more. might be slightly less, but we shall wait and see. The whole point of going to the open market is to generate interest, and it will gain us hopefully value for money.
It's an opportunity that we should have a facility to be able to encourage people to generate that. Councillor Cook. Sorry, Councillor Bayliss first, and then Vicky.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I welcome this. Any proposal which increases our businesses and makes them sustainable is a great thing. I just wonder if at some stage we could consider a scheme which is almost like the London Transport busker schemes they have on the London Underground. So we work out areas where we might have where you could hook up. You would have to pay rather a fee if you wanted to go on every Tuesday. So we've got some really interesting mobile food businesses. Taco Van from Apple. We've got a business in Bexhill Central that maybe we would want them to sort of, utilise more spaces than just be sort of in Pages Gap or somewhere else. And if you could come up with a scheme where you hook your mobile food business up to electricity you pay rather, the litter arrangements are all obviously then controlled instead of if they were on the street, because a lot of these businesses are just pulling up and doing business on the street. It could be a sort of win-win all the way round. So, if we go forward with the current proposal, but if that leaves then some areas that aren't let, to think about maybe whether we could do something a little bit different. As I say, working on that sort of the busker scheme for London Transport.
Okay, thank you for that point. Councillor Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. I love the idea of people singing for their supper while they're serving it. I think that's a brilliant idea. As part of the work with the Car Parks Task and Finish group, several councillors suggested that where the car parks are very quiet, particularly at the weekends, and I'm thinking of Wainwright Road and Little Common in particular, the car parks could be used for things like fruit fairs and charity events. And I wondered whether, I appreciate that this is mainly aimed at 3-year concessions, but I wondered whether, temporary weekend only kind of concessions to be considered.
Okay, well, that's a point to be taken away. I think we're talking about here static food and drink concessions on council-owned property, which I think is the right way forward. I think it creates opportunity and it generates potential income that we've seen. There's demand for it, so I think that we'll leave that with officers to explore.
Thank you, Chair. I think 2 points on sort of the climate emergency aspect of this, especially given it's sort of COP26 at the moment. The first one is, I know it was mentioned briefly in there about sort of sustainable vehicles and pushing for like electric or sustainable fuels. I think that's a really big issue that we don't want to let slip to the back of this. I know in Hastings they have an area in their town centre that's famously populated with sort of vehicles like this, and they've come under a lot of criticism recently because several of those vehicles are sort of pumping out CO2 by the gallon, and it's a real issue. So we don't want to fall foul of that. And the other thing is, I know healthy eating was mentioned, and I certainly won't be lecturing anyone on healthy eating. But in terms of the climate, the I can't even speak today. Is it the IPCC? That's the one. The IPCC report that came out recently showed that you can reduce your emissions by 50% by taking up a plant-based diet. And so I wonder if it's possible to promote or incentivize in some way plant-based businesses or plant-forward businesses that offer vegan and vegetarian options, rather than sort of just your classic dairy ice cream van that's causing a lot of carbon production just by the fact that it's using milk that needs to come from cows.
I'm sure officers will take that into account. We're here looking to authorise officers to promote locations in the market and into concessions. I'm sure they'll be very flexible. Graham, would you like to add?
Yes, it was just to say on that point, it is something that Deborah and I have discussed about encouraging sort of operator. And Deborah alluded to contact with sort of involved with this.
Thank you for that. No question coming from Councillor Drayson. Kevin, can I invite you to make any comment, please?
I've got a couple of questions actually first. Well, first of all, I noticed that recommendation 1 is only asking us to approve the locations. It doesn't actually say that we need to approve the operations at those locations. So I think in response to Councillor Timpey's inquiry, if we were to change from mobiles to fixed or from seating to not seating, that is within the gift of officers. We're not deciding that today. It's simply the locations. The other question I have is if other locations in Rother were inquired about, what would the procedure be to actually get them underway? Would we have to come back to Cabinet and do it all again, or can we actually agree something today that we delegate authority done rather than have to wait for the next Cabinet meeting?
So just invite Ben Hook to respond to that.
Oh, I mean, currently we do have to come to Cabinet every time we want to do something like this, lease out a piece of land. Not currently leased. We are looking at that as part of the scheme of delegation. So, to maybe give less delegation, that sort of thing.
In response, do you think a changed recommendation here would help, or do we just leave it to the working group?
I would say that the ones that have been highlighted in Appendix A are the ones that have had the most inquiries about them. We are, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm always in favour of more delegated authority, but I think maybe on this particular one, probably best to leave that bit to the Constitution, right, rather than sort of give us carte blanche to stick a bit machine wherever we want.
Question, Kevin?
That was it.
No,
that was
Thank you. Yes, it occurred to me just that this could be the sort of project that might be funded as, therefore might by bill appropriate and also help the finances. Haven't actually, we're likely to be looking at proposals for still weeks. I'm wondering if funding this that way, creating does environment for that.
Sounds a fair point. Does anybody like to make a response on that, Malcolm?
Yeah, but pardon me. I think what we need to do is gauge the interest and gauge what the costs are going to be, and then look at it in that sense. But I think as a suggestion, quite honest, I've never looked at funding sources in the or ignore a funding source. So I think we will look at all options for doing that. So I think, and again, tonight is something I think, but it's approving the principle. Right. Once we've got that established, then what kinds of there's no one be something worth looking at.
Thank you for that. Those comments. I think it will generate some creative thinking around the opportunity here, and where there's a generation of income, we've got to be looking at those all the way down the line now. Are you going to look to move this report now, Kevin, please?
Thank you, Chairman. And you know that all councils must adopt a more commercial attitude in order to survive, and I think that's what we're doing here, but without taking unnecessary risk, which is also an important point to note. That Rother is always pretty risk averse, and this is definitely not taking any risk, and it's a very low cost option. We've already established the principle of investing to save, and I think this is more of an invest to profit. We're looking to invest some of our money into making money, which is what we need to balance our books. But it's relatively low cost, it's a low risk approach, which will secure much needed income for the authority, and also improving our visitor offer as well in various places across the district, both tourists and residents alike. So I'm very pleased to propose this, and also to encourage Deborah, Graham and any other officers for more of these opportunities as they arise, because this is the sort of thing that we need to make our financial stability.
that, Kevin. Second that. Thank you, Jonathan. Those in favour of the Christine, are you in favour? Oh, thank you very much. Good. Okay. Unanimous. All right. Let's move forward. So that yes, it's the additional item. Thank you for reminding me, Malcolm, which I have on here. Okay, this is an additional item, agenda 9. This is the household support grant. Joe's report, which has come forward over the last sort of 48 hours, I believe, outlined proposals for the distribution of household support fund, the HSF, rather and seek approval for delegated authority to finalise the scheme locally in the process for distribution. Have you got all the answers to this at the moment, Joe, or not?
Fortunately not. No, I need to first apologise for the nature of the timing of the report because of how things have fallen time-wise. Yet it's pace. We are presently working with our partners across the county to fully understand the implications of the grant funding and also how we determine eligibility and also the process behind it. So the purpose of the Household Support Fund is to provide those who are experiencing hardship over the winter, COVID-related challenges, to access food, clothing, and heat, to support them with heating their homes, and also is inclusive of other broader items as well. East Sussex County Council, I can disclose, I wasn't sure when I published the report, received 3.9 million from the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Community, 50% of which is being allocated to schools for them to distribute to. The remaining 50%, a proportion is being awarded directly to the voluntary sector within East Sussex, with whom we're working very closely as part of the anti-poverty strategy development and rather voluntary action in particular, and to make sure that those sources and allocations of funding are coordinated between one another so there isn't duplication. 5 districts and boroughs, East Sussex have been liaising with the county and ourselves. We formed a project group which Rother District Council are leading with Wealdon Council. And the purpose of that group is to go about the work of defining the eligibility criteria and the process for distribution. Members will be familiar with the business support grants and the function for those through sites, and we already have the we already contracted to buy who can help us with the distribution of that electronically. So it will be a web-based access point, which does have limitations and will need support from ourselves and the voluntary sector to ensure that all parts of the community are able to access that funding, vulnerable groups particularly. So as I say, we will be working with our parishes, with other voluntary action, our town councils, etc. Of course, to try and make sure that this is promoted effectively and as accessible as possible. There will be staff resource implications, which are detailed in the report, where there is the facility for us to recoup some of those costs. And I think that is the main parts I can disclose at the moment. I could just add that looking more likely than not at the moment, we'll start the scheme with an eligibility criteria for those who are in receipt of some welfare benefits, but we will keep that under review because the demand will be possible for us to know what the demand of this will be. So we're going to be doing that, gauging that, and open that out to sections. Of course, thank you.
That, Joe, can you just go back to the numbers again? I didn't quite catch all of those. The amount that East Sussex is receiving.
Yes.
And then there's a proportion that's being handed out through to schools.
Yes.
And then to, what was the next point there? You mentioned that there's going out to community groups in some way.
That's right, yeah. Those, you spotted me being vague on the numbers.
Yes.
Yes, but I have been vague on the numbers because they are still quite loose. So the 50% has gone to there's an aspect gone, which I don't know the full total because I understand the county is still processing applications from the direct awards. Local government, districts and boroughs, excuse me, will be being issued approximately 750 to 800,000 between us. We're still really drilling down about how that can be most fairly distributed between the 5. It's going to be in the region of 100 up to 200 at the report.
There are other sources of benefit to our residents coming from schools and the community group. So
yeah, it will need coordinating. So with the community sector, because we want to make sure that we're targeting all sections of the community together, and that we avoid the risk of too many duplications of being awarded, and there is a risk of fraud here, which we manage as well, which is on our risk.
Sorry, I'll get that on. Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Christine Bayes.
Yes. Sorry, I'd just like to make a few points about this. I mean, I assume that this is the system that's been set up to compensate for the reduction of the £20 per week universal credit. It was announced as a...
I don't know that it was ever announced as cause and effect of that, but it's an observation that others have made.
Okay, because it really is quite a pathetic sum of money that is coming back to the county, considering the number of families that are in receipt of universal credit. There is a danger, of course, and I know that we will do everything we possibly can to make sure that there is no duplication and no over competitiveness in terms of distributing the money out and getting it out quickly, and making sure that some families perhaps benefit doubly and other families miss out. I'm really concerned about it being totally web-based. And we've used the same system, as you've said, you've used the same system for the business grants. And I can tell you that I've had to talk people through how to do the business grant applications. And I know that our officers have done a lot of work with individuals who, are running their own businesses and find it really complicated. So I am really concerned that we may miss out giving support. We have some very, very needy families in the district. I work with the food bank and deliver food parcels every couple of weeks, and it is quite shocking the level of poverty that some people find themselves in the 21st century. And whilst I congratulate you and all the work that you've done, and Sam, Councillor Coleman's done on anti-poverty work, this is really disappointing that this is the answer, even if it's not official, but it's the answer to taking away a universal credit from families that are suffering a cost of living crisis.
Well, that's a sort of central government making this. We're in a situation where we're part of the conduit of distributing this, and therefore I think we've every confidence in the team of officers led by the service manager here. Make sure it gets to the right people. Joe, do you want to come back on any of those points?
Yeah, no, they're all very valid points. I agree 100%. We're in a very reactive position, but we're very keen to support what we do have and support our county colleagues and partners to distribute this as effectively as we can. And I don't want to overstate the degree to which this will be akin to the business support grant allocation. It's the same software system, but a form is being designed to do as much as is possible within the requirements of what we need in terms of information to meet the needs of our service users. So, as I didn't mention in the report, which I can reassure you, we are going to be testing that form with voluntary sector partners to make sure it is as accessible as it can be. As I say, this is a partnership approach, and the fact that the county have awarded directly to the voluntary sector as well, so they have a bit more flexibility and a bit more of a nuanced, perhaps, ability to be more nuanced to the needs of their another layer down, essentially, local need. That's reassuring as well, I think, I hope. We are challenged because of the resource implications of this. So the reason for using online is 10% of the total is still going to be tight, that we'll be able to recoup with the level of support that's probably required. But I acknowledge, yeah, absolutely, and that's why it's so important that people are supported to access the online system. And of course, food banks, Harp Siddeley, other voluntary sector partners, Citizens Advice, who may well be awarded funds directly.
Thank you for that clarity on that, Councillor.
The fact that with the partner group, which is being led by us, that the fairness of the distribution of these. What criteria?
Presently, the proposal is to use total number of universal credit applicants as a way of distributing. We have requested that included in that is reciprocal credit. Our demographic here being towards an older population, the danger of it being across working age populations. So we have requested that, and that will be calculation. But literally, Catherine, my colleague Catherine Harlow, one of my housing managers, was on the call 3 hours ago, where this is being discussed. So it is really.
Yeah, just one of. Bearing in mind that this is obviously critical gets out during the time it's needed. Have you got any idea?
We have a target date of the next week or two moving. So we are keen to pace, and we've had a week so far, roughly a week. And I ambitiously put a target for the project group for the 15th of November. That may need review.
I think we're in safe hands, Joe. Thank you very much for that. Council Project, Sue.
Thank you. I think that one question, I'm assuming that our customer services team are going to be really fully briefed on this, so they can respond if they get that over. The other thing, Joe, is when we think about voluntary sector and statutory working together, and this is always comes up, is data protection. And so how is that issue going to be addressed? Because it's really difficult for the voluntary sector to find out who is in need. You have the lists like people on universal credit, and so you know those people, but the voluntary sector don't know these people. And you mentioned food banks, and I know with the Rye Food Bank, they do a really good job there, having somebody there finding out what other services people need when they come to the food bank. And I think they found sort of 11 different needs, from fuel poverty and all the rest of it. So I just that it's great voluntary sector and statutory working together, but there are walls.
Thank you, Jay. There are constraints, yes, and but that's the intention of having a web-based site like somewhere to which we can point, access this, hopefully mitigate some of that. So we've got the information that we can push out, those of which we're aware may well be in need, which is a key point here. But maybe I brought out in my narrative is the extent to which we need to promote this, to effectively make sure everybody knows that they can access it on the website, and they ought to do that either through their community groups or through ourselves, and we can try and support where possible. But yes, a fair point. But I think that's also what's been a constraint in terms of leading us to this web-based solution, because it does because people are self-selecting those constraints. So we will be pushing information out to who we know about, but also trying to keep the doors as wide open for wanting to tell us about information they know about. And as long as the person themselves is present, the GDPR is not constrained.
Right, Malcolm, make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. I would just reiterate the point, of course, the point Joe has made, but there is an urgency to have a limited amount of time. It is, even 100, 150,000, a lot of money. It may not sound a lot of money, but actually getting that out through the door before the end of March is a challenge. So I would just encourage members to sort of, if they are aware of people or they are aware of organisations in their village who may have something, please do get in touch with us, because we are going to need to work really very hard to get this money out. And we know people are being impacted. I'm not commenting on the national situation, but we know locally people are affected. We may not solve it with this, but this is a good start for actually getting something. So I would just encourage all members that through their various networks to speak to my colleagues. And Joe said then we can start working. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Councillor Sam Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, Councillor Bayliss is absolutely right. This is a sticking plaster from the government over a wound, arguably of their own making. But nonetheless, pennies are still pennies, and it's good to get them when we can. And I have absolute faith in Joe and all the staff working on this, that they're going to do everything they can to get as much of this money out to the people who need it as possible. You'll all know from the many times I've spoken on the anti-poverty strategy that we have a lot of families in poverty. And hopefully this will go some way to helping them with their right to food, their right to a warm home, their right to clothes, their right to happiness. All of these things that some of us take for granted. If this can go any way to helping people with that, then I think it's can only be a good thing. I think publication and promotion is key here. I really do think members will need to take personal responsibility for getting this out in their wards, posting it on social media, emailing it to the groups that you think it can go to. Obviously, we all say, yeah, sure, we'll promote it, and if it comes up in conversation, we mention it. But I think we all need to be proactive. We all need to get it out there, because it would be criminal if some of this money didn't end up being spent in time to help people, especially given how little money there is in the grand scheme of things. And if there's any way we can send a message to the government to ask them to keep sending us money to help people in need, that would be great as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Brian, did you want to? No, you didn't. Right. Okay. Sorry. Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As far as promotion goes, this isn't ready though.
Be ready in the next week to 2 weeks.
Oh, the problem with promoting now, as we go home now, is that we'll create all sorts of confusion, and there's nothing for people to go out. So we can say a date when it's going to be ready.
Yes, indeed. I'll be directly messaging telling you all the dates
So
ready.
I would say just wait till you get the date. Yeah, that's sensible.
I think you're right. I think once we've got the product there to actually impart to residents and make them aware, it's the awareness factor and all the sources of awareness that we have. So I'm sure we'll get there. If you want to make a comment, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do commend Joe and his team on the speed at which they've moved on this, which is fantastic. Councillor Bayliss mentioned the £20 cut in universal credit. Could I just get the maths right on this in my head? If you take the total number of people on universal credit and divide it by the
I'm sorry, Paul. I think this is about how much we're getting. We're not really comparing that, and I don't really want to sort of get into the political issues of universal credit. I think we've got an opportunity here to help residents of our district with regard to funding over the winter period. I think that's really what it boils down to, is the winter months. And I think that we will, through our officers, we will do as good a job as we're able to get it to the right people. So I think we're at a point now where perhaps Kevin, you've got your name against this, you can just lead this report, and we can give officers an opportunity of taking it forward.
Thank you, Chairman, and again, thank you, Joe. Just on the money side, this is for 6 months. It says in your report, this covers a 6-month period. So that's £200,000 for 6 months, which is £7,692 a week for the whole of Rother. It is pennies, isn't it? It really is quite. When we were giving out £10,000 for anyone with a holiday lecture in COVID, we wonder sometimes where people's priorities lie. It's a very, very sad state of affairs. However, this is an urgent decision that we've been asked, and we need to get through very quickly. It should be noted that Councillor Osborne, as chairman of the scrutiny committee, has allowed this to go to come through as an urgent decision, and for that we do thank him. It means it can go straight forward without having to be put in. I hope that the detail does become a bit clearer. It does seem a little bit of a scattergun effect when you've got many different agencies trying to maybe target the same people. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Are people going to fall down the gaps? That will probably become clear. One thing I do know is that this authority has a superb record in getting out grants to its to people in the district. So I have absolutely no doubt that we will get this £7,692 a week, if it is that, out quickly and to the people who need it, and residents should be reassured on that. So I'm quite happy with that to pose this as.
Second. This is not an urgent agenda item, it's an additional agenda item. Yeah, indeed so. And, good luck to Joe to get all the paperwork and everything else underway. So, challenge out there.
We're both very
Yes.
close with our revenue benefit. Also, I don't want to acknowledge their role is key.
Of course. And there may be further funds coming forward, who knows? One thing we have learned of late, there's nothing that's certain, everything's uncertain. So if we can just vote on this, thank you very much indeed. I think we're all in favour, and I think that brings our evening conclusion at whatever time it is, something like 19:53.